The video opens with a quiet scene. A disabled man rolling confidently toward a group of police officers. The air feels tense but calm, as if everyone knows something is about to go down. This isn't your average day in a small town. This man, armed with only his voice and his knowledge of the law, is about to challenge authority in a way most of us could only imagine. What happens next will make you question everything you think you know about rights, respect, and resilience. The officers try to engage him, asking for identification, their tone shifting between polite and firm. But he stands his ground, citing the First Amendment like a seasoned pro. It's not about defiance, it's about principle. With every word, he calmly proves that understanding your rights is more powerful than any badge or uniform. But just when it seems like the conversation is winding down, the tension spikes. One officer steps forward, pushing the interaction into uncharted territory. What unfolds next is a masterclass in standing your ground while remaining calm under pressure. How will this confrontation end? Stay tuned to find out. It's not what you'd expect. The officer steps closer, his body language stiffening, as if trying to assert control over the situation. The man in the wheelchair doesn't flinch. His tone stays steady, his words deliberate. Am I being detained, or am I free to go? He asks, his voice calm but firm. It's a simple question, but one loaded with power. The officer hesitates, glancing back at his partner, unsure of how to respond. The silence is thick, and you can feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air. Who is this man? How does he know the law so well? As the officers regroup and try to regain control of the conversation, he reveals bits and pieces of his background. A veteran, perhaps, or someone who has spent years fighting battles far bigger than this one. His knowledge of the Constitution isn't random, it's hard-earned. He's been here before in similar situations, and he's not about to back down now. The officer's patience starts to wear thin. You're making this harder than it needs to be, one of them says. But the man smiles, a subtle confidence in his demeanor. He knows this isn't over, and so do they. The officer's words linger in the air, but the man doesn't react the way they expect. Instead, he calmly leans forward in his wheelchair, his voice steady and unwavering. I'm not making anything hard. I'm just exercising my rights. You took an oath to protect them, didn't you? His words aren't confrontational. They're deliberate, measured, almost challenging the officers to think about their own actions. Meanwhile, a small crowd begins to gather at a distance, their curiosity piqued by the unusual standoff. Some pull out their phones, recording quietly, their faces reflecting a mix of confusion and concern. The officers notice this and seem to grow more self-conscious, exchanging glances as if debating their next move. One of them tries a different approach, softening his tone. We're just doing our job here. If you cooperate, this will be over quickly. But the man isn't budging. He responds with a simple, piercing question. Is doing your job worth violating someone's rights? The crowd murmurs, and the tension grows thicker. Behind the scenes, you can't help but wonder what led this man to become so fearless in moments like these. And how far are the officers willing to push? The situation feels like it's balancing on a knife's edge. The officer who softened his tone steps back, his attempt at de-escalation met with quiet defiance. The tension is almost tangible now, and everyone, officers, the man, and the onlookers, knows something is about to happen. The crowd has grown larger, whispers passing between people as they speculate about how this will end. Phones are held higher, capturing every detail. The man shifts slightly in his wheelchair, locking eyes with the officer closest to him. You can try to intimidate me, he says, his voice unwavering. But the law is on my side. You know it, and so do I. There's something about his tone, calm but powerful, that seems to rattle the officers. They glance at one another again, clearly unsure of how to proceed without crossing a line. Suddenly, one officer moves forward, his hand reaching toward the man's wheelchair. The crowd collectively holds its breath. "You're obstructing our investigation," the officer says, but his voice cracks slightly, betraying his unease. The man doesn't flinch. "Obstructing what? Your pride? Or your lack of understanding the law?" The officer freezes, his hand hovering for just a moment before pulling back. The tension peaks, and it feels like the entire scene is seconds away from boiling over. The question on everyone's mind now is, who will make the next move? As the officer hesitates, another voice cuts through the growing murmurs of the crowd. "He's right, you know." A man steps forward, phone in hand, clearly recording the entire encounter. He looks directly at the officers, his tone calm but firm. This is a public space, and he doesn't have to show you anything unless he's being detained. "Are you detaining him?" The officers visibly tense, their attention now split between the man in the wheelchair and this unexpected backup. The lead officer shifts uncomfortably, the weight of the crowd's eyes growing heavier. "This isn't about detention," he says, but his voice lacks conviction. The newcomer doesn't let up. "Then why are you trying to intimidate him? You're just proving his point." The man in the wheelchair glances at his unexpected ally, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes, before turning his focus back to the officers. "Seems like someone else here knows the law too," he says, his voice calm but pointed. The tension climbs higher, the crowd growing bolder as whispers turn into quiet conversations. Just then, a police radio crackles, and one of the officers steps away to respond. Whatever he hears makes his face tighten, and he quickly whispers to the lead officer. Their conversation is inaudible, but their expressions speak volumes. Something has shifted, and the stakes just got even higher. The lead officer steps forward after the whispered exchange, his expression a mix of frustration and reluctance. He takes a deep breath before speaking. "You're free to go," he says, his voice tight. The crowd lets out a collective murmur of disbelief, but the man in the wheelchair doesn't move right away. He looks up at the officer, his expression calm but unwavering. "That's it?" he asks. No apology, no acknowledgement of your mistake. The officer's jaw tightens, but before he can respond, the man who had stepped in earlier speaks again. "Accountability matters," he says, his voice carrying a weight that seems to land squarely on the officers. "You don't just walk away from something like this without learning from it." The tension in the air starts to shift, not easing but transforming into something reflective, almost somber. The officers retreat a step, clearly caught off guard by the situation spiraling beyond their control. Just as the crowd begins to think it's over, the man in the wheelchair turns to the onlookers. "This isn't just about me," he says firmly. "It's about all of us knowing our rights. Don't wait for a moment like this to start learning." As the officers walk away, the man glances at the crowd one last time before rolling off, his composure intact. But just as he's leaving, someone from the crowd shouts, "Wait, aren't you the guy from the news last year?" The man stops, turns slightly, and smiles. "You remember that too, huh?" he says cryptically before disappearing into the street, leaving everyone buzzing with curiosity about what they had just witnessed. As the man disappeared down the street, the crowd slowly began to disperse, but the energy lingered in the air. People murmured among themselves, reflecting on what they had just witnessed. Some stayed behind, exchanging stories about similar experiences or simply expressing admiration for the man's calm strength. The video recordings, already being uploaded to social media, ensured that this moment would spark conversations far beyond the scene. The man who had stepped in earlier shook his head with a small smile. "That guy's something else," he said to no one in particular before walking off, leaving behind a powerful reminder of the impact one person can have when they stand their ground. As for the man in the wheelchair, his parting words stayed with the onlookers. Asterisk don't wait for a moment like this to start learning. Asterisk, it wasn't just about the law. It was about empowerment, about knowing that rights are only as strong as our willingness to defend them. By the end, the confrontation wasn't just a lesson for the officers. It became a wake-up call for everyone watching. And just like that, a simple encounter turned into something much bigger, a moment of truth none of them would forget.